On Christmas Eve, the cowboy's wagon broke. The widow fixed more than just the wheel. Christmas Eve came quietly that year, the kind of quiet that only deep winter brings. The sky was heavy with clouds, gray and low, and the cold wind moved slowly across the open land. A lone cowboy guided his wagon along a narrow country road, his coat pulled tight around his body. The wooden wheels creaked with every turn, and the horse's breath rose in small white clouds. He had hoped to reach the next town before nightfall, but the day had slipped away faster than he expected. The road was rough, covered with frozen mud and thin patches of snow. The cowboy had traveled this path many times before, but winter changed everything. Each step felt uncertain. He leaned forward on the wagon seat, eyes focused on the road ahead, thinking of nothing except getting home. Christmas Eve had never meant much to him in recent years, but he still did not want to spend the night alone in the cold. Suddenly, there was a sharp crack. The wagon jolted hard to one side, throwing him forward. He grabbed the reins quickly, steadying the horse before it could panic. His heart beat fast as he brought the wagon to a stop. The silence that followed felt heavier than the cold. He climbed down slowly, his boots sinking into the snow. One look was enough to tell him the trouble was serious. The wheel on the left side had broken. A thick piece of wood had split clean through. He let out a long breath and rubbed his gloved hands together. This was the worst place for such a problem. There were no other wagons on the road, no houses in sight, only open fields and bare trees standing like dark shadows against the sky. He tried not to feel angry, but frustration rose anyway. He had fixed wagons before, but not in this cold and not with damage like this. He knelt beside the wheel, touching the broken wood, hoping somehow it might still hold. It did not. The wheel leaned at a weak angle, useless. The cowboy straightened and looked around. The sun was already sinking, and night would come soon. The temperature dropped fast once the light faded. He knew staying outside for long would be dangerous. Pulling his coat tighter, he walked a short distance up the road, searching for anything, smoke, lights, even a fence line. For a moment there was nothing. Then he saw it. Far off, near a bend in the road, a small farmhouse stood alone. A thin line of smoke rose from its chimney, and one window glowed softly with warm yellow light. Relief washed over him, slow and careful, like warmth returning to frozen fingers. He did not know who lived there, but it was his only chance. He returned to the wagon, tied the horse securely, and began walking toward the farmhouse. Each step felt heavy, not just from the snow, but from the long years he carried with him. He was used to being alone. Life on the road had taught him that expecting help often led to disappointment. Still, Christmas Eve had a strange way of opening doors, even for those who had stopped knocking. As he approached the house, the light grew brighter. The place was modest, with weathered wooden walls and a small porch out front. Everything looked old but well cared for. He paused at the gate, suddenly unsure. It had been a long time since he had asked anyone for help. Finally, he walked up to the door and knocked. Inside, the widow was finishing her evening chores. She had lived in that farmhouse alone for years now. Her days followed a quiet routine, especially in winter. Christmas Eve was no different. She had made a simple meal and lit a candle near the window, not out of celebration but habit. The light made the house feel less empty. When she heard the knock, she froze. Visitors were rare, especially after dark. She moved carefully toward the door, listening. The knock came again, gentle but firm. She opened the door just enough to see who stood outside. The man before her looked tired and cold. Snow clung to his coat and hat. His eyes held both strength and weariness, the kind earned through years of hard living. He removed his hat politely and spoke in a calm voice, explaining his broken wagon and asking if he might warm himself for a moment. She studied him closely. Life had taught her to be careful, but it had also taught her the value of kindness. Seeing the cold in his hands and the honesty in his face, she stepped aside and invited him in. Warmth filled the room as soon as the door closed. The cowboy stood quietly near the fire, letting the heat soak into his bones. The widow poured him a cup of hot drink without saying much. There was no need for many words at first. The silence between them felt natural, not uncomfortable. As he warmed up, he explained what had happened on the road. The broken wheel, the long distance to town, the fear of being stranded overnight. She listened carefully, nodding now and then. When he finished, she surprised him by standing up and reaching for her coat. She told him she had repaired farm tools and wagon parts before, back when her husband was alive. Even after he was gone, she had learned to do things herself. Life had not given her a choice. If the wheel could be fixed, she would try. The cowboy followed her outside, disbelief mixing with hope. The cold air bit hard, but together they walked toward the wagon. She examined the damage closely, her movements confident and sure. He realized then that she was not fragile, despite the quiet way she carried herself. As they worked, they spoke more freely. Not about big things at first, but small ones. The weather, the road, how long winter nights could feel. Slowly, pieces of their lives slipped into the conversation. He mentioned how long he had been traveling alone. She spoke of the farmhouse and how quiet it had become after her husband passed away. The wind howled softly around them as they worked on the wheel. The task was not easy, and it took time. Their hands grew numb, and they had to stop often to warm them by the lantern she brought along. Still, neither complained. There was comfort in working together, in sharing the burden. The cowboy noticed something change inside him as the night went on. The road no longer felt endless. The cold no longer felt as sharp. It was not just because of the fire waiting inside, but because someone had seen him, listened to him, and offered help without asking for anything in return. The wheel was not fully fixed yet, but progress had been made. Enough, at least, to give him hope. When the widow suggested they stop for the night and continue in the morning, he agreed. Traveling in the dark would be risky, even with repairs. They returned to the house, bringing the quiet night with them. Inside, the candle still burned, steady and bright. Outside, snow continued to fall, covering the road and the broken tracks behind him. On that cold Christmas Eve, the cowboy realized that the breaking of his wagon wheel had brought him somewhere he did not expect. Not just to a farmhouse, but to a moment of connection he had thought was no longer meant for him. And though neither of them said it out loud, both felt that this night was the beginning of something important, something that would stay with them long after the snow melted. Morning came slowly to the farmhouse, as if the winter itself was reluctant to move. Pale light slipped through the window, resting softly on the wooden floor. Outside, the land was quiet under a fresh layer of snow. The world looked clean and still, untouched and calm. The cowboy woke first. He lay still for a moment, listening. The house creaked gently, the way old homes always did in the cold. The warmth of the room surprised him. It had been a long time since he had slept indoors without worrying about the weather or the road ahead. For a few seconds, he forgot where he was. Then the memory of the broken wagon and the widow returned. He sat up slowly and rubbed his eyes. A simple blanket covered him, neatly folded. He noticed the care in small things, the way the room had been prepared, the way everything had a place. It reminded him of a life he once knew, before years of travel had turned his days into a constant journey. From the other room, he heard quiet movement. The widow was awake too. The sound of a kettle warming over the fire reached him, followed by the soft clink of a cup being set down. These simple sounds felt comforting, almost forgotten. He stood and adjusted his coat, then stepped into the main room. The widow greeted him with a gentle nod and a small smile. She handed him a warm cup and motioned for him to sit. They did not rush into conversation. The quiet between them felt natural, like two people who understood that not every moment needed words. As they ate a modest breakfast, the widow spoke about the morning chores she needed to finish. The cowboy offered to help without thinking. The offer surprised her, but she accepted. It had been years since someone else had shared the work around the house. They stepped outside together. The cold was sharp, but the sky was clear, and the sun reflected off the snow, filling the land with light. They worked side by side, feeding the animals and clearing paths. The tasks were simple, but doing them together made the time pass easily. As they worked, the conversation grew more personal. The widow spoke about her life before she was alone. She did not speak with sadness, but with honesty. She talked about long days shared with her husband, about laughter and hard times, about learning to be strong when life demanded it. The cowboy listened closely. He did not interrupt or rush her words. When she finished, he shared his own story. He spoke about the road, about moving from place to place, never staying long enough to put down roots. He spoke of how freedom sometimes felt like loneliness when there was no one to share it with. The widow nodded, understanding more than he expected. She told him that being alone did not always mean being strong, and that strength did not always mean being alone. Her words stayed with him. After the chores were done, they turned their attention back to the wagon. The wheel still needed careful work before it could safely travel the road. They examined it together, discussing what needed to be done. The widow brought out old tools that had belonged to her husband, tools she had learned to use over the years. The repair took time. They worked slowly, making sure each piece was secure. The cowboy admired her patience and skill. She worked with quiet confidence, never doubting herself. He realized that life had shaped her into someone capable of handling more than most would expect. As the hours passed, the conversation continued. They spoke about small dreams they once had but never fully chased. He admitted that he had always thought settling down was not meant for him. She confessed that she had built walls around her heart after loss, believing it was safer that way. The sun climbed higher, and by midday, the wheel was nearly ready. They tested it carefully, rolling the wagon forward a short distance. It held. A feeling of relief passed between them, shared without words. They returned inside to warm themselves. The widow prepared a simple meal, and the cowboy offered to help again. The act of standing together in the kitchen, sharing space and purpose, felt almost unfamiliar to him. Yet it also felt right. As they ate, the cowboy noticed something change within himself. The thought of leaving no longer felt easy. The road had always been his answer, his escape. Now, for the first time in years, he questioned whether moving on was truly what he wanted. The widow sensed the shift too. She had grown used to quiet days and lonely evenings. His presence had brought a different kind of warmth into her home, not loud or overwhelming, but steady and reassuring. She reminded herself not to expect too much. Life had taught her that moments could be meaningful without lasting forever. In the afternoon, snow began to fall again, light and gentle. They stood by the window watching it drift down. The world outside seemed distant, as if the farmhouse existed in its own small circle of peace. The cowboy thanked her for everything she had done. He spoke sincerely, his voice steady but full of emotion. She waved off his thanks, saying it was only right to help someone in need. Still, she appreciated his words more than she let on. As evening approached, they prepared for another quiet night. The wagon was ready now, but the weather made travel difficult. They both knew staying one more night was the wiser choice. Neither objected. That evening they sat near the fire, sharing stories that carried both laughter and reflection. Time passed gently. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering the road once more. Before going to rest, the cowboy stepped outside alone for a moment. He looked at the wagon, now standing strong and steady. He realized that while the wheel had been repaired, something else had been mended too. A part of him he did not know was broken had begun to heal. Inside the farmhouse, the widow watched the fire burn low. She felt a quiet hope stir within her, cautious but real. She did not know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in a long while, she felt open to the possibility of change. As night settled in, both lay down to rest, carrying thoughts they did not yet share. The road would wait. For now, the farmhouse held more than warmth. It held the promise that sometimes, life pauses not to delay us, but to guide us somewhere we did not know we needed to be. The next morning arrived with a quiet stillness that felt deeper than before. Snow had stopped falling during the night, and the sky was pale and clear. Light filled the farmhouse gently, touching the walls and the old wooden table. Everything felt calm, almost paused in time. The cowboy woke with a strange feeling in his chest. It was not worry or urgency, emotions he knew well. It was something softer, something steady. He sat up slowly, listening to the sounds of the house. The widow was already awake. He could hear her moving about, careful and unhurried. When he joined her, she greeted him with the same gentle calm she always carried. Breakfast was simple but warm. They sat across from each other, the table between them no longer feeling like a distance. Their conversations flowed easily now. The silence that once felt unfamiliar had become comfortable. After eating, they stepped outside together. The air was cold but bright. The repaired wheel stood strong, holding its shape well. The cowboy tested it again, pushing the wagon forward a few steps. It moved smoothly. The repair had worked. He should have felt ready to leave. Instead, he felt heavy. They stood near the wagon, neither speaking for a long moment. The road stretched ahead, white and quiet. It waited just as it always had. The cowboy had followed roads his entire life. They had given him purpose, distance, and escape. But now, standing there, the road felt different, less inviting. The widow noticed his pause. She did not ask him questions. She had learned that some thoughts needed space to breathe. Instead, she returned to the house to gather tools and tidy the work area. He watched her go, noticing the small details he had not before. The way she moved with quiet confidence. The way she carried herself, not weak from loss but shaped by it. As the day went on, they found reasons to stay busy together. There were small repairs around the farmhouse that needed attention, a loose board on the fence, a latch that did not close properly. The cowboy offered help and the widow accepted. Working together had become natural. While they worked, deeper stories slowly came to the surface. Not all at once and not forcefully. They spoke when the moment felt right. The widow shared memories of her husband, not just his passing, but his life. How he had taught her to use tools, how they had laughed while fixing things together, how he believed she was stronger than she ever realized. She spoke of the loneliness that came after, of long nights filled with silence, of learning how to keep going when no one else was around. The cowboy listened, truly listened. He did not try to fix her words or ease her feelings. He let them exist. He understood more than he said. Loss had followed him too, though in different forms. People he had left behind, places he never returned to, chances he never took. Later, when the sun reached its highest point, they rested near the porch. The widow brought out warm drinks and they sat side by side, watching the open land. The quiet did not feel empty. It felt full. The cowboy finally spoke about something he had avoided for years. He spoke about why he kept moving. How staying in one place reminded him of things he had lost. How leaving felt easier than facing what remained. He admitted that the road was not always freedom. Sometimes it was a way to avoid stillness. The widow nodded slowly. She understood that kind of fear. She told him that she had stayed in one place not because it was easy, but because it forced her to face life every day. She said that both staying and leaving required courage. The difference was knowing which one your heart was asking for. Her words stayed with him. As afternoon turned toward evening, clouds gathered again. The air grew colder. The widow suggested preparing early in case another storm came. They worked together, bringing firewood inside and securing the barn doors. Their movements were practiced now, comfortable. Inside, the fire burned steady and warm. Shadows danced softly on the walls. The cowboy felt something settle within him. He had not realized how tired he was until now, not just physically but deep inside. They shared another simple meal. Laughter came easily this time, surprising both of them. It had been a long time since either had laughed without effort. As night fell, the widow brought out an old box. Inside were small keepsakes, things she had saved over the years. Letters, tools, a photograph. She hesitated, then shared them with him. Trust showed in her actions, quiet and sincere. The cowboy felt honored. He realized that trust was something he had not earned often in recent years, mostly because he never stayed long enough. This felt different, real. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows softly. Snow began to fall again, thicker than before. Traveling would not be possible tonight. Neither mentioned it. They both already knew. Later, as the fire burned low, the conversation slowed. They sat quietly, each lost in thought. The cowboy stared into the flames, seeing memories reflected back at him. Roads stretching endlessly. Camps under open skies. Long nights alone. He wondered if that life would ever feel enough again. The widow watched him from across the room. She sensed his inner struggle. She did not reach out or speak. Sometimes presence was enough. Before turning in for the night, the cowboy stepped outside once more. The snow fell steadily, covering the ground, the wagon, the road. Everything looked softer, quieter. He felt something shift within him. A question formed that he had never allowed himself to ask. What if stopping was not failure? Inside, the widow prepared the house for rest. She felt a mix of emotions she had not felt in years. Caution, hope, fear, possibility. She reminded herself not to rush feelings. Still, she could not ignore the change she felt. The house felt less empty. The nights felt shorter. When they finally rested, sleep came slowly. Thoughts moved gently through their minds, not heavy, not urgent. Just present. Somewhere between waking and dreaming, both understood something without words. This meeting was not an accident. The broken wheel had been more than a problem on the road. It had been a pause placed by life itself. Tomorrow would bring choices. Roads would open again. But tonight, under the falling snow, two lives rested under the same roof, both quietly changed, both standing closer to a turning point neither could yet fully see. The storm passed during the night, leaving the world quiet and bright once again. Morning light entered the farmhouse gently, reflecting off the snow outside and filling the room with a soft glow. The air felt fresh, almost new, as if the land itself had taken a deep breath. The widow woke before dawn, as she usually did. She sat on the edge of her bed for a moment, listening to the silence. For years, mornings had begun the same way, quiet, steady, predictable. But this morning felt different. There was a sense of awareness, of shared space that she had not felt in a long time. She rose and prepared the fire, moving carefully so as not to wake the cowboy. As the flames caught and warmth spread through the room, she began her usual tasks. Yet even these familiar actions felt lighter. She realized that she was humming softly without noticing. The cowboy woke a short while later. He stretched and sat up, feeling rested in a way he had almost forgotten was possible. The weight he carried from place to place felt less heavy here. He stood quietly for a moment, taking in the sounds of the house coming to life. When he joined the widow, she greeted him with a warm look and handed him a cup of hot drink. Their eyes met briefly, and both felt the quiet understanding that had grown between them. No words were needed. After breakfast, they stepped outside together. The sky was clear and the snow sparkled under the sun. The repaired wagon stood ready, strong and steady. The road beyond it was open again, waiting. The cowboy walked around the wagon, checking everything carefully. The wheel held firm. The horse stood calmly, ready to move. Everything was as it should be, yet he did not climb onto the wagon. He stood there, hands resting at his sides, staring down the road. The widow watched him from a short distance away, giving him space. She understood that this moment belonged to him. Finally, he spoke. His voice was quiet, thoughtful. He said that for the first time in years, leaving felt harder than staying. He admitted that he had always believed moving on was the only way he knew how to live. But now, standing there, he felt unsure. The widow listened carefully. She did not rush to respond. When she spoke, her voice was gentle but steady. She said that life often gave us moments to choose, but it never forced the answer. She told him that whatever he decided, it should be something he could carry without regret. They walked slowly back toward the house. The day stretched ahead, calm and open. There was no urgency, no pressure, just time. They spent the morning working together again, finishing small tasks around the farmhouse. The cowboy repaired a loose step on the porch. The widow organized supplies in the barn. They moved easily around each other like people who had known each other far longer than a few days. As they worked, they spoke about simple things, favorite meals, seasons they liked best, small habits that brought comfort. These details, though ordinary, felt meaningful. They were learning each other not through grand stories but through everyday moments. At midday, they rested on the porch, the sun warming their faces. The widow spoke about her fears carefully, honestly. She said that opening her home again had not been easy. After her husband's passing, she had closed herself off, believing that loss was the price of caring too deeply. Letting someone back into her life felt risky. The cowboy understood. He told her that he had lived in motion to avoid that same risk. Staying nowhere long enough meant nothing could truly be lost, but it also meant nothing could truly grow. Their words settled between them, heavy but clear. As afternoon came, clouds began to gather again, though not threatening this time. The air grew quiet, thoughtful. The cowboy walked to the edge of the property, looking out over the land. The widow joined him. He told her that he did not know what the future would bring. He could not promise things he did not fully understand yet, but he knew that something inside him had changed. The road no longer felt like the only answer. She told him that she did not need promises. What mattered to her was honesty and choice. She had learned that life could not be controlled, only met with courage. They stood together in silence, watching the land stretch out before them. The world felt wide but not lonely. As evening approached, they prepared another meal together. There was laughter again, easy and real. The house felt alive in a way it had not for years. The widow noticed it too. The walls seemed warmer, the space fuller. Later, as the light faded, they sat near the fire. The flames flickered softly, casting long shadows. The cowboy spoke quietly about his plans. He said that he would stay a little longer, help with repairs, see where the days led. Not as a decision carved in stone, but as a step taken with intention. The widow felt a mix of emotions rise within her. Hope, cautious but real. Gratitude, a quiet sense of peace. She nodded, accepting his words as they were. Outside, night settled gently over the land. No storm followed this time, just stillness. Before resting, the cowboy stepped outside one last time. He looked at the wagon, at the road, at the farmhouse behind him. For once, the road did not pull at him. It waited, patient, understanding. Inside, the widow prepared the house for sleep. She paused, looking around the room. It no longer felt like a place she simply endured. It felt like a place where something new could begin. When they finally rested, sleep came easier than before. The night passed quietly, without unrest. Somewhere deep inside both of them, a truth settled gently. Life had broken something to lead them here, but it had also offered the chance to rebuild. Not perfectly, not without risk, but honestly. Tomorrow would come with its own questions. But tonight, the farmhouse held two people who had found, in each other's presence, a reason to believe that the hardest roads sometimes lead to the most unexpected homes. Morning arrived quietly, like it had learned to respect the stillness of the farmhouse. Soft light slipped through the windows, resting on the floor and walls as if it belonged there. The snow outside had settled, smooth and bright, and the sky was clear once more. The cowboy woke with a calm feeling he had not known in years. There was no rush in his chest, no urge to count miles or plan the next move. He lay still for a moment, listening to the house breathe, the crackle of the fire, the faint sound of movement from the other room. Life, steady and close. When he stepped into the main room, the widow was already awake. She smiled when she saw him, not wide or excited, but warm and real. She handed him a cup of something hot, and he thanked her quietly. They sat together at the table, sharing breakfast in comfortable silence. This morning felt different from the others. There was a sense of clarity in the air, as if something had gently settled into place. After breakfast, they stepped outside together. The air was cold but kind. The wagon stood ready, strong, and dependable. The horse shifted calmly, waiting. Everything was prepared. The cowboy walked toward the wagon, then stopped. He turned back to the widow, his expression thoughtful. He told her that he would leave that day, but not in the way he once would have. He said he needed to take care of unfinished matters to close old chapters properly. But he also said he would return, not out of duty or hope alone, but because he wanted to. The widow listened, her heart steady. She did not try to hold him back. She had learned that love did not grow through force but through trust. She told him she would be here, living her days as she always had, but with her door open again. They stood together near the porch, the cold air wrapping around them. He thanked her for everything. Not just for fixing the wagon, but for seeing him when he had forgotten how to be seen. She told him that sometimes people came into our lives not to stay forever, but to change the direction of our steps. And sometimes they came back. He climbed onto the wagon, picked up the reins, and paused. He looked at the farmhouse one last time before turning the wagon onto the road. The widow stood watching, her hands folded calmly, her heart full but steady. As the wagon moved away, she did not feel the sharp pain of goodbye she once feared. Instead, she felt something quieter and stronger: trust. The road stretched ahead of him, but it no longer felt endless. As he traveled, the cowboy thought about the days at the farmhouse. The shared work, the conversations, the peace. He realized that for the first time, the road felt like a path leading somewhere, not away from something. He traveled to places he had left unfinished. He spoke to people he had avoided. He settled small matters and let go of old regrets. Wherever he went, he carried the memory of the farmhouse like a steady flame inside him. Weeks passed. Winter softened. Snow melted slowly, giving way to open ground and early signs of spring. Back at the farmhouse, life continued. The widow returned to her routines, but they no longer felt empty. She repaired what needed fixing, tended to the land, and welcomed the days as they came. Some evenings were quiet, some were lonely, but none felt hopeless. She found herself smiling more, looking toward the road now and then, not with longing but with calm expectation. One afternoon, as the sun hung low in the sky, she saw a familiar shape moving along the road. A wagon, steady, unhurried. Her heart recognized it before her mind did. The cowboy guided the wagon toward the farmhouse and brought it to a stop near the gate. He climbed down, looking older somehow, but lighter too. His eyes met hers, and in that moment everything that needed to be said already had been. He told her he was back, not just for a visit, not just for shelter, but because this place and she felt like home. They did not rush forward. They walked toward each other slowly, meeting in the space between. Their smiles were gentle, their understanding deep. Life did not change all at once. They worked together side by side, learning the shape of shared days. Some days were easy, others required patience. But both understood that building something real took time. The farmhouse filled with quiet laughter and purpose. Repairs were made. New habits formed. The road remained nearby, but it no longer ruled his life. On the next Christmas Eve, the world was cold again, but the farmhouse glowed warmly against the snow. A candle burned in the window, steady and bright. They sat together near the fire, listening to the wind outside. The widow rested peacefully, no longer alone. The cowboy felt grounded, no longer running. Neither claimed that life had been perfect. Both knew loss and hardship would still come, but they had learned something important. Sometimes what breaks on the road is not meant to stop us forever. Sometimes it slows us down just enough to lead us where we belong. And on that quiet Christmas Eve, with the fire warm and the night calm, two lives stood no longer apart but gently, firmly together.